I think we're ready to start. Hope everyone had a good lunch. That was a great lunch. It was very good. Enjoyed that. There were really good sort of conversations going on. I thought that was fantastic. So obviously that's a load of fun. I hope you had fun. So we're ready. Welcome to this afternoon. So the first session this afternoon, we're going to talk about customer engagement. So what I put up here was just a couple of the 2024 kind of themes that I'd heard sort of monitoring news and podcasts. So, a lot of discussion around customer engagement over the last the last year around things like flexible support models, omni-channels being a theme across things like podcasts and those kind of things. AI, unsurprisingly, came up a few times, where and when to use it. Data's obviously come up and sort of support and how do you build relationships and some of the things we talked about this morning around trust and those kind of things. So collections, as we know, is really all about engagement. So this session, we're really going to talk about how to engage customers, what's been seen, new communication methods that are out there, the tools and technology, what's changing and what's new. So just to bring the people in this session up. So with me on this session, we've got Ajay Mitha, who's the head of customer operations from Interbridge. So they're a mortgage finance company. I don't know, Ajay, if you're here, come on up. Got Sam Challenger, who's the Director of Credit Collections and Customer Experience from Billing Finance in Family Motor Finance Company. I think that's the way to say it. Rob Thompson, who's a partner in collections and recoveries from Brachers. And Huw Vaughan, who's business expert from Exus in the collection system space. So everyone, welcome. So to start off, I suppose customer engagement is a pretty broad topic, and when we were talking about this in the intro, sort of the prep session we had, it's almost like where to start, right? So and it's been changing over the last couple of years, and I suppose I wanted to start off by talking about how has it changed and what are some of the changes we've seen. Things like channels, what kind of channels are seen, what kind of interactions are changing with customers, and sort of like how you sort of seen that developing. And Huw, I don't know if I come to you first, just in terms of like, what are some of the things that you've seen when you've been out there talking with clients, and sort of like, what are they asking for? I mean, what are they seeing from their customers?
Right. So it's an interesting one for me because it's been a while since I've been involved in the sort of cut and thrust of day-to-day collections operations, but as you rightly say, I have a great opportunity to work with numerous clients across different sectors and across different regions. And what I would say is that there's a significant spectrum involved in customer engagement. And it's not obviously, it's being driven by customer demand, obviously, but it's the reaction of businesses to what their customers are actually requiring. Okay, so the spectrum is really significant in terms of, on one end, you've got businesses that are embracing things like two-way SMS, WhatsApp conversational conversations, virtual assistants are coming in, and then you've got the other end of the spectrum, which is where people are still running dialers, a number of different times a day. They're not embracing two-way SMS. They're just sending one SMS and hoping for a reaction from that call to action. They may be sending an email without any actual purpose to that email. So I think what you've got is this considerable span across the engagement capabilities of businesses today.
So it feels like it's sort of evolved, but it seems like you still have to look at the different, almost like the different cohorts in terms of like how you interact with them. I mean, Sam, you obviously have customer contact as well. I mean, what have you seen with sort of like your portfolio in terms of, are they looking to interact in a different way, or is it still the same as it ever was?
I often talk about the fact that how often do we answer our phones? You get a phone call that comes up. Do you answer them even to your family? I sometimes, no, I'm busy. Never mind a number I don't know. So the days of us sitting on a dialer system for hours and hours has changed. People don't answer the phones. And you can see that from your data. You can see that your phone calls are just missed. People don't answer them, but you make the phone call because it's a good tick from the FCA's perspective. You made that attempt, haven't you? So we see a lot of customers interact with us by when they've got the right headspace. So sometimes they'll contact us in the middle of the night via a digital channel, and they'll make some disclosures. And then because they've made that initial disclosure to us, then they are open to having a conversation. And I think it's that you've got to start that engagement piece first and then you can have those hard conversations. And I enjoyed Russell's talk earlier, and I always giggle with Russell about what vulnerability should mean or shouldn't mean. And I think for me, I differently to Russell, I don't mind that vulnerability has been broadened, because all it's actually meant is that you talk to people in the right way. Vulnerability doesn't mean you shouldn't ask for money or shouldn't come to a payment arrangement with people, but it just means you're aware of how they want to be spoken to or how they want to be contacted. So yeah, for me, dial a day is long gone. I still have a telephony-based call centre with people in it, but more often it's two-way messaging, it's emailing, it's going through the digital journeys and saying, how do you want to be contacted, what's choices for you, and then giving them their options.
But that's quite interesting in terms of not looking at it as almost like that one and done, sort of like the old days of first contact resolution. Remember that? It's now sort of like going back to the previous conversation around trust. Like, how do you build up trust with like other types of channels before, and then maybe they'll talk to you on the phone if they need to. So it's like that combination. I mean, Ajay, what's your kind of perspective on it? You've been in a few places.
Yeah, so I think we're a new startup, so I really think it depends on what type of engagement you're trying to have. So, for example, if it's a collections type, vulnerability type sort of situation, it's good to speak to that person on the telephone to really understand, probe, get the information, actually understand what's going on, and also that empathy aspect too, which I think is really important. But if it's a servicing type piece, then there is a need for a self-serve type option. And we've had that sort of request from some of our new customers coming on board of, do you have a self-service option? Do you have an app, for example, to do some sort of transactional type inquiries, sort of making settlements, one-off payments, etc. They don't really want to speak to people to do that. So having that flexibility, having both approaches, but working out which is best for each is important. I think thinking about the omni-channel piece is, I think it's great having all different ways to communicate with customers, but the key thing, and I think it was mentioned on the early one, was that single customer view, making sure that you have customers that are able to, you can see that joined up approach to what they're requesting and what they've done previously, rather than having to repeat themselves and stuff, which I think is really important.
Do we need to make a difference, I suppose, between contact and engagement as well, right? So you can have the contact, how do I get in contact with you, but then engagement means kind of something extra, right? Which is like, how do you then get to have that discussion piece? I mean, you know, so Rob, you're more in the legal collections piece, which is much more, even more so around engagement, because you need to get more information, those kind of things. I mean, what's your kind of perspective on it?
Yeah, I am actually quite keen on sort of trying to do as much as possible. Variety is the spice of life, you know, and I appreciate there might be sort of previous experience with a customer or analytics that would say that a particular route might have a more beneficial sort of contact rate than others. But you're still going to have the outliers, and you're not going to pick them up unless you find the method that they're wanting to use and that suits them at that particular point. And that might change through their experience. You know, they might have been quite happy to talk on the telephone or something at one point, but now perhaps less so because it's potentially going legal and they're feeling the stigma of the situation. They don't necessarily want to speak to somebody. So I'm very keen on having, you know, variety being the spice of life. Give them as many options as you can and try and run through in a constructive way. Particularly pre-legal, I've always been sort of advocated kind of starting off very gently, you know, because people react differently to the prospects of litigation. Some people might be terrified by it, which might make them phone you or contact you in some way, but it might equally make them go away and hide. Other people, they won't care. They've been there 1,000 times before. They won't give a monkey's. So I kind of, you know, always like to think, you know, we'll start off gently, we'll start off nicely, offering assistance, all the rest of it. Hopefully you'll pick up people who might be vulnerable and that sort of thing, and then you can sort of toughen up that messaging. And again, using a variety of contact methods until they finally engage with you, and then you can obviously have that conversation with them and work out where they want to go from there.
How much is it customer preference versus almost like the way they interact and almost like a personality kind of type? And I know there's been stuff done elsewhere around that. I mean, how much do we need to understand that versus being led by the customer? I mean, is it possible to do that? I mean, some people might be scared. Other people might be wanting to engage to get stuff ticked off, if you see what I mean. I mean, how much do we need to understand that, and how much of it is really led by what they want or what they say they want to a certain extent?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think you just have to. You could do the studies, you could do the analytics, but you're going to get the outliers, you know. And if you don't, you know, I think it's a dangerous road to go down. You know, not giving people the options. Again, for covering off from a regulatory point of view, to making sure that you are giving the options, the customer choice that's there. ultimately, there are some things that obviously have to go through particular channels. So, for example, if you are going to go legal, you're going to be sending them things through the post, for example, at some point, which may not be the most modern and effective way, but you can back that up with emails to let them know it's happening as well and things like that. And just, as I say, just thinking it through carefully, making sure as well as what's right for the customer, thinking about what it will look like when looked back upon. Did we cover all the bases? Did we give every opportunity? Did we try to do everything to discover vulnerability before we ended up suing somebody? I think they're really, really important points.
I mean, Huw, how do we sort of build that into collection strategies? I mean, I don't know, things like within your collections kind of process. How are you sort of starting to see that being incorporated? Because there's an explosion of channels out there to a certain extent. You can do different things at different points. You've even got field collections that are out there, so like door-to-door kind of stuff that's actually taking place as well. I mean, how are you seeing people sort of like combining sort of this or handling this extra complexity around getting to engagement?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing a lot of work with British Gas recently over this sort of engagement strategy, and it's really been a program of digital transformation, if the truth be told. Yep. So it's involving use of multi-channels, obviously, the multiple communication channels. It's involving a self-service portal as well, so driving the traffic that collections operations would normally deal with to the portal. Taking all that feedback and reviewing that, the data that you're getting out of that. British Gas themselves have been doing a lot of work around personas, so segmenting by personas. Going back to Rob's point. And then in the sort of, I guess, the welfare visit space as well, that's a really interesting one for us to be involved with as well, because we spent a lot of time with the team there developing an app that will help their welfare officers conduct welfare visits as well. So, and that's all about engagement as well, because at the end of the day, those welfare officers are in a fairly sort of high-risk situation. And so they want to be able to have those conversations, clearly have the right information and engage with the customer at what is quite a risky point of the customer journey. Yeah,
but so you're kind of saying it's not about digital channels as much as digitizing the process so everything can kind of interact with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the digital channels have been around. As I said at the beginning, there's a whole spectrum of usage of these digital channels. It's still very traditional. That's what I see. It's still very traditional in a lot of businesses. Digital is obviously being embraced, but it's how you put all of that together to come up with a real digital transformation program ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, Sam, I was going to come to you around sort of like, I suppose, the whole piece around digital that we've got and sort of like digital interaction, digital engagement. We talk a lot about that, but I know we were having conversations around how do you make sure that customers don't get left behind as well, particularly in some of the space that you've been in. When we were chatting, you were sort of talking about that. It's like making sure they don't get left behind. How do you approach that?
I think we spoke about the fact that during COVID, a lot of businesses went to digital only because we sent all our staff home. There wasn't anyone to answer the phone calls. And actually what we really did was we just cut the customer off, because a lot of customers, certainly in my space and in a lot of other sectors, there's a huge population that are digitally challenged or priced out of digital. So if you're not available for the phone call, they can't engage with you. So what we've tried to do, and it's where the customer experience tag on my job title came in, is I went to a lot of customer experience and customer service conferences. Because what you do when you're marketing for someone and what you do when you're trying to get a customer actually is worlds apart from what you do when you're trying to contact them to get your money back from them. And actually what we looked at was it should be the same, because ultimately, if you're trying to engage to get someone to pay you, that's probably your hardest sales job ever. So what you've got to do is have all your options, but actually genuinely have all the options, that a customer can have a similar experience by any of the channels of their choice. And if it is that they want to disclose in the middle of the night when they feel comfortable to do so, there's a way that can happen, and not just up until a point, that can happen, and then they can continue to have their journey. So we should be in a place where we can build the rules around that if someone says, I'd like to offer you this amount of money to pay, there's enough guardrails that says, okay, we've asked this question, we've done this. Okay, you're a grown-up, you're making this decision. Yes, you can make that payment arrangement, and then it talks back to your own system. We're not there yet, we're a small family business, but those are the things that should happen. You should have one system of truth. So as in, you don't have to tell us 50 times, all right, I see that you went on to X, you sent us a WhatsApp, you sent us a text message. I've got that information. Yes, your plan has been set. There goes the letter out to you. The letter can go out by snail mail or by, email, whatever it is. But you just have to make sure that it's the customer's choice. Yes, we've all got commercial targets, and there has to be the return on investment. But actually, the biggest thing, and I can always remember from years in debt collection, you pay the most to engage with the customer. If that customer engages with you, you've won half the battle. You can have a lot of contact, you can have a lot of phone calls, you can have a lot of people saying, yeah, sorry, I'm busy, I'll phone you back. They don't phone you back. But if they're actually engaging with you, that's gold dust. And what you have to do is turn that into an outcome for that person.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I suppose you're saying there around, like, on every interaction, there's flexibility around how you then interact with someone and then how you then take the next steps as well. And so there's quite a lot of sort of like personalisation, really, which we're talking about.
Well, I was going to say, the new world, personalisation beats personas. So it's, should you have a customer database so that you can actually do proper personalisation as opposed to personas? And in one of the conferences I did when I went to on customer service, they had a couple of scenarios of what you think a person of a certain age or gender or whatever is, and then they kind of showed you how that wasn't necessarily the case.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose, but the question with that is, how do you do that at scale, right? So if you've got a customer on the phone, if we were talking, we'd have a personalised kind of, outcomes. We could decide what we're going to do next. The question is, how do you do that at scale if you're in sort of like the B2C market? You've got a larger portfolio, and how do we start to think about building that into our processes? I mean, AJ, I'm not sure if you've got what your kind of view on that is in terms of like, how do we start thinking about, it's really around customer outcomes, really, at the end of the day. How do you get to the right customer outcome, but doing that at scale?
Yeah, I think with our business, we're a very small portfolio, so we can sort of have that one-to-one relationship that you talk about. But when it's a much bigger scale, I think it's to do with the data, the segmentation that was mentioned before, and actually understanding who your customer actually is. You can actually sort of engage with, and I've done this in a previous place where you actually engage with the frontline teams to actually come up with the same sort of process that you talk about at the conference, but probably at a larger scale, and actually build those personas to work out, okay, how does that particular customer like to be communicated against? And then you do some like A/B testing on it rather than just saying that's what we do for everyone or that's what we think we need to do. Because as you said, surprising things may come up that you don't sort of expect. Yeah. I think just going back to the previous question as well, I think you need to think about what you're trying to do with regards to the engagement piece. So if you just want to put people through digital only to save money and that's your driver, then that sometimes sort of backfires because obviously you've got the regulatory issues and stuff with that. But actually our approach is that we want to give customers the opportunity to self-serve where they can and they want to, but actually at every single point within their digital journey, they should be able to exit out and actually speak to someone on the phone quite quickly and be able to resolve their sort of query there too. And I think that's really important to have that, not just focus on the cost saving, but focus on actually the journey. And the cost saving may come as a result of that, as a side effect, rather than just forcing that point.
Yeah, so I was going to talk a bit about segmentation there. So you're sort of segmenting it into different kind of, but even within that, even within the journeys, you still want to be able to get out to someone and have all the channels available. So you might have almost like is it digital first or not digital first, but you can still have whatever you want as a result of that.
I think some of it is also what are the outcomes you're able to offer? Because again, I think you sometimes go down a little bit of rabbit holes as to what all you need to know about a person. So I know we often talk about vulnerabilities and you need to know every last thing about the person's vulnerability. And actually I kind of say to my guys, well, okay, so what? So someone has X conditions, so what? You're not a doctor, so what? What do you need to know about it? And from a collections perspective, all you need to understand is what support they need. Yeah. So they've been signed off for 6 weeks. Okay, that's what we needed to know. We didn't necessarily need to know what the condition was that they were signed off for. So I think, again, when we're looking at personalisation, some of it is sticking to what we need to know to drive the various channels or drive the various outcomes and not go down the rabbit holes of, okay, so if someone's got cancer, do I do this? If someone's got diabetes, do I do this? If someone's young and on maternity leave, do I do this? If someone's old and on maternity leave, do I? So I think it's starting at your outcomes and kind of trying to map backwards as well to see what you need to know to send someone down a channel, and you may be surprised by who goes down a certain channel.
Yeah, I think messaging is key really as well. And to your point earlier, Sam, you were saying about making the most when someone does engage with you, you've got to actually get that real engagement, not just them fobbing you off kind of thing. And I think that's where the messaging really comes in. You've got to find that trigger point where they actually want to speak to you. And in terms of scaling up, I think that comes back to having an automated kind of workflow that may encompass every sort of method that you want to employ in a certain portfolio. I would say as wide as possible. But then hopefully once you get that trigger point somewhere and you find that trigger that makes them want to actually talk to you, and you've got them, then you can have that conversation, and then you're there really. You're working with them, and that's the key point. So I think that is quite scalable.
Yeah. I mean, Huw, what's your kind of view? I mean, you obviously, you'll do this on a larger scale as well, in terms of like the complexities around building this stuff in.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's there's two things. When it comes to scale, I think there's the data and the analytics that go on top of that data. So for me, when we talk about personalization, I struggle to understand how we can deliver personalization without having prescriptive analytics in place. Yeah. So for me, that's key, and I very, very rarely see that actually happening. So if people are looking to do true personalization, how would you do that without the prescriptive analytics? Okay. And then the second thing is really around the sort of the digitization of the communication channels. So I'm a great believer in taking an omni-channel approach, and having a situation where you're able to get through the day on an intraday basis, managing those channels effectively, and using the segmentation that you've done to have those day-to-day strategies that are actually executed through that omni-channel, some form of omni-channel platform, for example, something that will manage your voice, your auto voice, your IVM, your SMS, your email, and basically have it that way.
Mm-hmm. It does feel like it's a bit of a sort of like a chicken and egg kind of discussion we've got here, which is on one hand we want to pick the right channels and we want to segment around the right channels, but on the other hand we also need to listen to the customer around letting them know around which channels we kind of want, right? So it's kind of like one feeds the other, and once you started you can keep going. It's like, where do you kind of start is kind of the question. I mean, how much do we need to listen to what the customer wants upstream, sort of like outside of collections, if you sort of mean, so like further upstream, and have that engagement? And is that something that do we really talk about, particularly when we're talking about customer outcomes? Do we need to start looking at it in a different way? I mean, Sam, what's your kind of
so
view? It feels like it's a gap.
Our business is broker-led, so a lot of our customers don't even know that we're their finance company. I think the same, a lot of store cards you'll go into, I don't know, I'm old, we'll go into a Debenhams, you'll get a Debenhams card, and 3 years later you realise actually it's Virgin or it's Everyday Loans or whatever it is. So we've started, years ago, we started that engaging with a customer from the beginning, because when it comes to collections, I want them to tell me all sorts of things about them. And they don't know who we are. They don't care who we are, and we didn't care about them until they owed us money. We didn't phone them, we didn't send them birthday cards. So what we started doing was we would send like nudges as engagements right from the very beginning. Welcome to Billing Finance. We're here if things change. You're here with us for 5 years, life happens, talk to us about your cars. We'd send them nudges, it's winter, don't forget, run your car, check your tyres, blah, blah, blah. So we'd start that kind of engagement, and then from that you'd know if people engage, if they did respond to those messages. Some people responded and said, we don't want to hear from you. Some people responded saying, thank you. Some people blocked our numbers. But you learn from these things, and then you know that, okay, text message is not the market for that person. Try an email, try a phone call, and you just build your database. And that's why I said about having a customer database. So you've got those. It's not just preferences from a marketing perspective, but it's preferences on how you're actually going to engage with that person. And back in the day on the dialers, you used to know best time to call. It's kind of using that, but taking it a next step. This customer always emails us. So guess what? Let's email that customer. This customer always rings us at 8 o'clock when you open the phone lines. Guess what you should be doing when you want to try and speak to them? And it's just building that knowledge base in exactly the same way we used to do it with just telephony. It's now just bringing in all those other channels, but from an earlier perspective.
Yeah, but it's those early, almost like pre-collections nudges or pre-arrears kind of nudges that can give you the intel to do some of the segmentation Huw you're talking about. I mean, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've been talking about this a lot because we want to introduce like an app, a self-serve app. And that was because obviously we think there's a benefit there. But one of the things with an app is I recently upgraded my phone, and when I went through, I deleted a lot of apps that I don't use. So how do you actually make it useful for people to want to use it? Because in our sort of business, once they get the loan that they have, that's sort of the end of it. They've got the money. So what we're trying to do is actually sort of quite early at the start, get them to do certain processes through the app that they need to as part of the loan fulfillment, but then have a breadcrumb approach to, this is when your loan's about to pay, etc., because they'll be obviously keen to look at the app to work out when they get paid. But at that point, give them nudges and stuff about, oh, do you know that when you get your loan, you can make an overpayment, or you can request a settlement, etc., and do things there so they can see the value at the front end, rather than forgetting about it once they've got the loan, and then when you have payment difficulties or you want to do transactional things, that you have that, so they understand the value of what they need.
Yeah.
I think that's fine, but when you think about bigger businesses, it gets a little bit more complicated. Yeah. So if you're a startup, obviously you've got the benefit and the flexibility to do that, or a smaller business. But when you're in a big business with legacy systems, multiple databases everywhere, it becomes much more difficult. And finding the sort of, I guess, the space to be able to get collections onto an app, and have sort of collections capability on an app, for example, at a mainstream bank would be almost impossible. I mean, I've yet to come across it, or a big utilities. Having that ability would really, really help. But then you've got the whole internal politicking, the prioritization, the budgeting. It becomes very difficult for bigger businesses to do this.
So I mean, you raised the L word there, legacy systems, right? So like, how do we best think to work around that? So you're absolutely right. If you're a newer business, then you don't actually have some of those complications. But if you do have those complications, what's the best way of thinking about how to work about it? And particularly this chicken and egg kind of scenario. So any thoughts on that?
Well, it's a difficult one, obviously, because you can only work with the tools that you've got. I'm a big believer in the analytic approach. Yeah, I mean, we've spoken a lot, and we heard at the first session about the difficulties and the challenges that people are faced with data, both in the private and the public sector. But I still believe that the data analytics is the key to it. And my personal take on it is that most are still in the world of descriptive and diagnostic analytics, okay? We're yet to really move into the world of predictive and prescriptive analytics. And that, for me, is the key that will unlock the sort of Pandora's box for a lot of this.
And I suppose, just thinking about it, I mean, you have to engage with someone at some point, and if you can do that early on, then you start to get some of that, even if it's not in the customer kind of care.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, how much of this information sort of can flow down through the collections, almost like life cycle, into like later stage, into sort of like debt collections, recoveries, debt collections, even the legal kind of pieces? I mean, are we doing enough to like flow some of this stuff through? I mean,
yeah, I think so. I mean, it's really important that it does happen because again, from a regulatory point of view, if you've had customer choices up front and you're not respecting them later on, that can give you a lot of difficulties. And just coming back to the point earlier as well about customer choices, there is a regulatory aspect to that as well. If someone's telling you that they don't want to receive letters or something, then really you do have to respect that, particularly if they're concerned that they might have a reason for that, like they don't want other family members knowing about their situation or something like that. And again, I think that's a plus point though for us in that situation, because we know that we can say to them, well, that's fine, you pick your contact method and we'll continue to engage with you through that, but you must keep up that contact. And if you don't, then obviously you'll appreciate we'll have to go back to the others. Yeah. So again, I think that's a way forward.
And what about styles of communication? We talked all about channels and how to get hold of like second tech, but what about styles of communication that is a way to actually grab the attention? And this comes back to your marketing point, Sam, really around like how do you grab the attention to actually start that engagement as well? I mean, the old collections letters maybe aren't quite as effective, I would suggest, maybe as some of the newer kind of methods. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the cohort. I mean,
some of the old collection strategies were really good. You used to send a postcard out telling them someone was going to be in the street, and we all knew that was a lie, and we're not going to do that anymore. So I think it's
writing that down.
Once you know better, do better, and it's just those small changes, and it's understanding your marketplace. So if you've got a customer cohort that's got a low reading age because you've got a lot of people whose first language isn't English, write to them in a way that they're going to understand it, and make sure that what you're asking them to do is obvious and easy to do. And we've all been in sessions where we know that our choice is don't phone us because that costs us money. So Send it in by email. That's your first, call to action that's most visible. We all know we do that. But it's like, just know your cohorts. And if you've got your data that says, this tranche of customers always rings us, well, just put your call to action for those calls, those customers, with your phone number really obvious. Don't make it difficult for them to reach out to you in their way. If they want to email you, they'll email you if you have that call to action easy available. Don't condescend. Don't try and scare them. The world is so much more, knowledge is so much more available on the internet, and they're going to find a forum that tells them how bad and horrible you are. They're going to find a forum that tells you they can get out of paying their debt. They're going to find all of these things. And if you're not transparent and open with them, they're going to start looking for this information elsewhere. So for me, it's all about just being as transparent as you can be. And if you've got kids in your household, give your letter to a 10-year-old. If your 10-year-old can read it and mostly understand it, so will a lot of your customers.
Yeah. So it's about honesty and transparency. There's also this other idea in the background, almost like, was it the attention economy it's called, where we've all got quite short attention spans as well. Do we need to take that into account? I mean, AJ, what's your...
Yeah, I think just building upon that, it's just like simplifying the message, really. And instead of just being accusatory or just a standard collection letter that we've all seen back in the day, is there an issue? Is there a problem? How can we help? Just literally make it so that it seems it is friendly, and we are friendly. We're not scary people. If there's a problem, we understand and we want to try and help you, basically.
Yeah. Absolutely that. I mean, as I said earlier, it is a sales pitch, really. We're selling a solution here. We're saying, we can help you. We want to be friendly. We want to be approachable. We should be outcomes focused. We should be looking at getting them out of the debt situation they're in. No one wants to take legal action against people. It's not going to do them any favours. It's expensive. It's the part of resolving it is to try and avoid that as soon as possible. So as I said earlier, we start off very friendly. Start off trying to help them. That's the messaging that we're putting out there. Obviously, as I said earlier, people react to different things, and you might end up ramping up to the threat of legal action. And of course, straight away the threat, that's a difficult word, isn't it? With regulators and that sort of thing. But turn it around, transparency. This is the outcome that we don't want to have happen, but that is what may happen if you don't engage with us. So there's lots of different levers, and they're not all negative by any stretch of the imagination. There's lots of plus points that you could put in about how we want to help you.
You're making me think, actually, last night I was in the despair of social media, I think, last night, and I was talking about the election in the US, and then one of the things they were saying about why they got the result they did was around clear messaging. And it was very simple, clear messaging, and it just kept on going, which it kind of resonates. Obviously, it kind of works, right? So it's a certain thing.
A little and often messaging helps as well, as long as you're not straying into the harassment area. Yeah. Little and often, just that key message, drip-fed in, just to remind them that we're there to help. Is this causing you an issue? Is that causing you an issue? Please talk to us. That can be very helpful.
Yeah.
I think it's just clear messaging. It's, we know that when we send you a letter, we're there to help, we're there to resolve it. But I suppose from a customer's perspective, if you say to a customer, what help do you want? They're going to say, write my debt off. So we are here to help you resolve your debt. We're not necessarily here to help you. And none of us want to add the costs on, because if you're not paying the £100, you're not going to pay the 250 extra costs. All of these things, and I think it is just ensuring that messaging is transparent. If you don't engage with us, court action could happen, and this will increase your debt. Please engage with us. We want to resolve this for you. And I think it's continuing those kinds of messages. In my world, I don't want to take your car off you, but we will, because that's what a secured debt is. Same in the mortgage market. It's just being transparent. And earlier when Russell was talking about priority debts, I'm really curious to know in the general population, do people think that their council tax is a priority debt? I don't think so. Do people think paying for their car is a priority so they can get to work and back and they can take their kids to school? I think probably yes. If I had to choose paying one or the other, I'd probably pay for my car. And I think, when we talk about what's happening out there in the land of real people, I think these kinds of conversations and these things should happen. And again, we're all governed by the FCA, and they say, well, I need to check that someone's up to date with their priority bills. But you should also allow someone to make an unwise decision if that actually helps them keep their vehicle, keep their job, take their kids to school, continue with a lifestyle. not an irresponsible lifestyle, and I know we get into the realms of you can't tell someone what to do and what's irresponsible and what's not. But I think, again, when we're sitting around and working out what's a priority debt, what's a priority bill, some things are priorities to some people and others are to others.
Well, priority debts seem to change on your perspective, don't they, in terms of like priorities from an industry point of view versus priorities from an individual point of view. I don't, Roy, you look like you were going to comment then, but enter a debate
from a regulatory point of view, because I suppose the FCA would say, well, there's a chance of you going to prison if you don't pay your council tax. Well, we know that's probably highly unlikely to happen, as you say. So in the real world, then probably they are going to react exactly as you just suggested. So yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose, how do we keep that conversation going? I suppose we talked a bit about how do you grab the attention? How do you sort of like get people to engage? But then it's like, well, then what's the follow-on with that in terms of like keeping the conversation, keeping the engagement kind of going? You talked about being open and transparent. I mean, what are the next steps that we kind of think about? I mean, is it more of the same? Is it using the same contact channels? Is it how do you keep that engagement? And when do you continue to talk with people? I mean, AJ, I mean, it's like. I mean, that's what I'm talking about, the contact strategy, like after you've had that initial engagement.
I think the initial engagement is really important because sometimes people are just scared at that point, and once they actually do engage, they sort of realise that you're not that scary, you're not going to say things or be aggressive or anything else, and then you have those conversations to work out, okay, what's actually happened, have the conversations, but also just reinforce the message that, it took us a while to engage with you, we're only wanting to help you, and by taking this period of time, this is what's happened if there's like negative impact because of the credit file or anything else, but offering them the other options that they can do that. And I think you said it's that constant dialogue. If they're in long-term arrears, you'll maintain that anyway because you want updates, you want to understand what's actually happening. But if they resolve the arrears, say at that point, you want them to feel comfortable that they can approach you again, and maybe before they get into trouble too, so that you can actually try and help and assist pre-problem.
Yeah, it's a bit like it's like when you go to the doctor, you're a bit nervous about going to the doctor. But when you've gone to the doctor and you come out and you think, oh, that's better. It's kind of, I feel like I'm pleased I did that.
Yeah.
I mean, is that always like that? Is that a measure we should kind of have? I mean, I've seen it before. You have net promoter scores in collections have been higher than you've seen sort of earlier upstream. I mean, that's the sort of thing we should be aiming for? Is that an active measure that we should look for? I don't know, Sam. You're gonna.
I was going to say, so I can have a really good customer satisfaction score and give the customer some really bad outcomes. And I can give the customer some really good outcomes and actually not necessarily have a really good customer satisfaction score. So I think we're moving into a world where we need to just be mindful of what the two scores mean. My kind of rule is do what you say you're going to do. And the granny test, if you would speak to your granny like that, then you're probably doing all right with how you're going to speak to someone. If you want a letter that's going to, have someone have a heart attack when they open their post, you need to change your messaging. So it's just do what you say you're going to do. Do it in an honest way. When you get that engagement, follow through with what you've said you're going to do. And even if you are giving a customer the right financial outcome, but actually it's not what the customer wants, you can do it in a way that still ensures that they are okay with the way you've dealt with it. We survey our customers after their cars are repossessed. That's how confident we are that our repossession guys are actually doing it the right way. If you get bad reviews then you know you've got a problem. But yeah, we've had one out of X many that we've sent out where someone said the agent did this and the agent's got a door camera, so we know the agent didn't do that.
Yeah, we do the same actually. We do surveys, and that's in the sort of the wider debt recovery piece at various stages of it as well. And we've been quite shocked at how well we've been scoring, because obviously there's a bit of an advantage because if you are getting the ones that simply don't engage, they're unlikely to respond anyway, I guess. But yeah, those that are engaging with us, do find that a very good experience. And back to the sort of the first point you made, really, I think it is. Getting that first contact is the really difficult thing. Keeping the momentum after that is relatively easy. They know what we're like then. They realise they're not the beast that perhaps they were scared of, and they realise that we're there to help. So or to get that outcome that they need.
And Huw, I was going to take a different kind of question, which is like, obviously then you're talking with agents as well at some point as well. I mean, what's the role of the agent interaction with like the information, providing the information for agents to potentially have the conversation with customers and those kind of things. What's that kind of role that can play in terms of getting the right information for customers?
It's absolutely critical. I mean, one of the things that I'm able to do when I'm sort of visiting clients and working with them is to listen into calls. I've been really, really impressed. I believe there's been a real sea change, particularly in the UK, in the way that the agents are dealing with customers now. They're very thoughtful, they're very empathetic, they're very professional, and it is clear that businesses across multiple sectors have done a lot of work in this agent-customer engagement. Yes, there are tools that can help, like agent scripting and this sort of thing, which will prompt agents through these conversations. But ultimately, it's the way that individual reacts with these customers to keep that engagement going. So for me, it's absolutely hypercritical. And I used to think that, in the digital world that I've been working in for a number of years now, that it would take over everything. But I just don't believe that anymore. I mean, it's just impossible for me to see a world where that will happen. I truly believe that the agents that are involved in this are absolutely critical to the success of collections today.
Do you think when we haven't really talked about AI, right? So and I've tried to avoid it actually today because we talked about it a lot last year. But when you talk about AI and talk about like analytics of calls and those kind of things, do you think it's going to change the way agents interact with customers? So as an example, so you were talking earlier, Sam, around like the questions you kind of ask, and you don't have to necessarily ask them in a scripted kind of way. You can ask them in a different kind of way. In fact, you can even ask pieces of information that might be useful later on. Do you think it's going to change the way we have the conversations to make them more natural, and then be able to pull that out that can actually be useful information for things like segmentation?
Well, it depends which way you look at it. Does the AI, sort of drive the human, or does the human drive the AI? And I think we all know that today humans drive the AI. So I think it will just supplement and support our human interaction, which I've said is absolutely critical, and I don't see ever sort of really disappearing. I think what we can teach the AI to have those conversations better. So as virtual agents become more and more important in terms of running collections operations, the human touch can really inform those virtual agents in how to handle customers, not the other way around. I don't believe that today. That will happen in the foreseeable future, at least.
Yeah, I mean, well, AJ or Sam, do you want to maybe just comment on something?
Build upon that really. I think you're right what you say here about it not replacing the agent, because I think that key bit is the empathy piece and getting the AI to do that, whatever sort of you've seen out there. We had a meeting with one of the tech guys, and they'd seen a demo of this AI agent doing basically a call with a customer. They're like, oh, this is the next thing. This is what's going to take over, and trying to push it forward and sort of challenging that piece of, does that really work in collections? And actually, we're jumping way too far. Firstly, the technology is so expensive, but also a lot of what we deem as AI isn't actually AI. It's decision trees or whatever, just sort of like enhanced, not actual AI. But instead, we sort of talked about how can we help the agent. So all our policies, procedures, process mapping, etc., could that be put into an AI bit? So it's like a co-pilot type piece, so that when the agent's on the call, and if it's speech analytics as well, that gives you sentiment of how's that customer feeling, but also when they're asking questions, it gives the agent the knowledge, because that job as an agent is a tough job to do. They have to retain so much information, and actually getting that right first time can be quite difficult, particularly if you're a new agent on the phone. So actually giving that and supplementing their training, etc., using AI, I think could be sort of a step towards getting to that sort of place.
Yeah, I mean, I was also wondering around, if you have a conversation, you have a much more natural conversation, and then the AI can kind of actually pull out some of the elements of it. So instead of being a scripted conversation, we start off with ID&V, go through the details of the account, what's your forbearance plan. You can have a much more sort of natural conversation, which is more organic, but gets to the same point, but actually pulls out the information in a different way. I mean, I don't know, but that would be changing the way we interact with. It's a more human way to interact to a certain extent, even though the AI powers the data extract. I don't know what.
Yeah, I mean, during COVID, we had a very scripted decision tree to ensure that we got it right as to what forbearance we offer to people at various stages. And the FCA were quite pleased with that decision tree. Now, my agents hated it, and so did my customers. Because if you rang up more than once or twice, you got almost the exact same script going through it, because the agents needed to know that they were going to offer the right forbearance at the right time. So the idea of being able to have a conversation that covers all of it in a natural human way, and depending on the answers, go down a different channel, just go down a different question, is great. And if you've then got the AI that pulls out the back, that you've still then got it in a routine, we asked this, and this is where we got to.
This is a gap, yeah.
That would be really helpful for an agent and for the business. Because again, from our perspective, when I was an agent, 80% of our phone calls were just people phoning up to make their instalment. I'm just going to make your payment today. Now, that doesn't happen anymore. Those calls are scarved off. People are doing it by digital channel or by a self-serve. And the calls that the agents are taking are in-depth calls where people are disclosing things or they're being unable to pay. And, with the cost of living crisis, our agents on the phone are also suffering from these things. And it's day in, day out, call after call. So I think we need to remember the support for the agents as well. Because if our agents are engaged, they're going to engage with our customers.
So I want to ask about, take a different tack now, to ask about late-stage collections and legal. And I suppose the question here was, what is a good outcome? What is a good outcome? And I think you touched on it earlier in terms of what is a good outcome. It's not necessarily customer satisfaction, but I mean, how do we best think about defining that? I mean, that's a big thing in terms of consumer duty. What the customer might think is a good outcome, not necessarily, as you said, Sam, it's not necessarily what we might think is a customer. What should be our best approach to that as we sort of engage in customers? I mean,
well, I think it is looking at the facts of the case, and I certainly see myself working as a firm of solicitors acting for my client to get the best result for my client and for their customer. That's really what it is. Whatever that might look like, and that could be a completely different. From one extreme to the other. It might be someone who's incredibly vulnerable, maybe has some sort of extreme medical condition or something, and the debt needs writing off, to it is paying tomorrow because you've really got no excuse. You've got the money and all the rest of it. But often it'll be somewhere in the middle, but it will be looking at and understanding their exact situation. And I think that is, the customer-focused outcome point is key to that, because they're not necessarily incompatible. I think when the FCA first came into view, we were sort of thinking, well, how does this work then? Putting the customer at the heart of everything you do while suing them. But of course we don't. That's not the way we do it. We didn't do it then, to be honest. When we stepped back and thought about it, we thought, no, that's not what we're doing. We're trying to work with them, explaining the consequences if they don't engage, working with them to get the best possible outcome that is possible for them based on affordability or whatever else it may be, and then putting that in place, hopefully avoiding legal action for them. So actually, they're not at all mutually exclusive. And it can work very well.
And what about the evidencing side of that, though, in terms of evidencing that that's actually a good outcome, right? Because people have different views on where they kind of sit, but particularly from a regulatory point of view, is how do you evidence that that was the right outcome for the customer?
Yeah, we're having some interesting conversations at lunchtime. Vulnerability came up again, and the amount of times that people throw out that they've got a mental health issue or something, it's just a throwaway line a lot of the time, which annoys me because it devalues when it is true, when people do have genuine mental health issues, the fact that people just throw it out there as a throwaway comment is really unhelpful and not fair, really. But again, you can drill down straight away. You can explore that, probe, and find out really whether there is a genuine mental health issue or whether actually it was just that throwaway line and move on. Income and expenditure, yeah, you look at them sometimes and you think, is this really correct? But again, you can double check it against searches, that sort of thing. Look at their lifestyle and make a judgment call, really. But I think it's a lot more collaborative. Once you get that initial engagement, you can collaborate a lot more.
Yeah, I
was just going to say,
around the evidencing piece.
I think on the outcome piece is also the QA piece. I know recent ruling with the TSB stuff was showing that they were saying that when they were looking at the QA for each individual interaction, it was classed as a good outcome. But actually, when you put it together, it wasn't a good outcome. So it's that customer journey type piece, which does take a lot of time and effort to do rather than just listening to one interaction. But I think on longer term arrears or later stage, I think that's really important to actually see what that whole journey looks like to get the learnings rather than just individual interactions.
Yeah. And Sam, what's your kind of, I suppose, view on that? I mean, I suppose maybe you talked about it a little bit before, but anything to add?
I suppose for me, for the outcome, we're all in finance, so you've got to look at the best financial outcome for a customer. And we have the conversation of a customer trying to save their vehicle versus a financial detriment. And you've got to weigh that up when you look at the outcome of, is someone making truly unwise decisions, i.e. they're not eating, they're not just to keep a vehicle running, and actually is that financial hole getting bigger and bigger? And that's what we look at when we look at evidencing to making sure last resort before.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you to press a bit on the evidencing piece, just given, I suppose, regulatory scrutiny and that. How do you make sure that that's as I suppose, as protective as possible in terms of like the right decisions being made as well? Because you want to make sure that if it comes back on you, that you can actually demonstrate that to a certain extent.
So obviously with borrowers in financial difficulty and all of the scrutiny that happened with that, we did a lot of changes around. We don't, so if someone's one payment down, we won't just set a payment arrangement up. If someone phones up today and says, oh, didn't pay you yesterday, but I promised I could pay you on Friday, historically we would say, okay, we'd kind of set that up for the person, and then guess what? They didn't pay on Friday, and it would keep rolling. So what we kind of say to the agents is you need to make sure there's an element of evidencing. So the first time a customer rings up and they've just said, oh, I had to pay for this, it'll happen on Friday. Check the priority bills, check that they're not making unwise decisions, and let the agreement go through, but with a note that, yeah, they're going to pay on Friday. If they need to split the payments, because as in they actually didn't have the money this month in total, a lot of our customers are paid weekly, but our payments are monthly, then ask for an income and expenditure. Do elements of the standard financial statement. If it's more than like 2 months, do a fuller one. And ultimately open banking. So that, again, you can show that it's not just a one-off blip, someone had car repairs, a washing machine broke, whatever the answer is, but actually it's a sustained reduction in their income, and that's what we would use. So if it's a sustained reduction in their income, that actually this vehicle is unaffordable for them, the best thing to do is get them out quickly so that their credit file can improve and they can get back on top of their normal bills, their other bills. If it is just a short-term thing, they had, 2 weeks unpaid because they were sick or whatever, and you can see it, the evidence is there on the open banking or the pay slips, that's the kind of thing we're using to evidence that we are making the right decisions along the way.
I mean, doing this, again, doing it at scale it can be complex. And I suppose, Huw, I was going to ask you just around, how do we need to think about some of the reporting that sits with this, and I suppose the importance around recording some of these things that, just like Sam was talking about. I mean, how are we sort of going to see that kind of evolve, do you think?
Well, that's an interesting one. I guess, from my own personal experience, it's just, again, a question of having being able to identify the right data, having the right analytics in place. And again, I did sort of say that, there's a big spectrum of, in terms of businesses on the analytics spectrum. But if you've got good descriptive and good diagnostics analytics in place, then you should be able to actually, evidence those outcomes and measure those outcomes accordingly. Obviously, I'm not sort of involved in the day-to-day running of sort of collections operations anymore, so it's a little bit more difficult for me to sort of comment on the preciseness of that. But that's how I would see it sort of evolving. Yeah.
Okay, well, fantastic. And I don't know if we just put the questions up real quick. I got a bit of feedback saying trying to put the questions up a little bit earlier, so we'll put the questions up. And just to sort of, we're almost at time, and I wanted to go, just before we won't go to any kind of questions, is just maybe just talk about where do we sort of like see us going from here. So we've got, when we're sitting here next year, what will we be talking about? What's going to be the hot topics next year? What do we got to have on our radar screen from a customer engagement point of view? Maybe I'll go to start with you, Sam, then go down the panel from...
Well, I hope next year we've had a Supreme Court ruling that rules differently to the one a couple of weeks ago, and I hope that we're not talking about the fact that a lot of customers have been priced out of car finance.
I think for me, really, it's just depending on recent budget, etc., cost of living, what that does to inflation and interest sort of piece, and whether or not, particularly in my area of mortgages, or how that affects sort of the arrears type piece. But I think it's just going to be an enhancement. I think technology is developing so quickly with the AI and other bits and pieces. I know we don't particularly use that, but yeah, I think there are going to be some other solutions out there, so it's developing fast.
There's regulatory, economic.
Yeah, and I think, more people in financial difficulties. To that point, I think that's something to look out for, definitely. And again, they're always the most frustrating when they don't engage. But you end up, worst case scenario, you end up taking legal action, and you sort of think, why on earth did you not just tell us you're in this situation? We wouldn't be in this situation at all. So I think that's probably going to be increased. Yeah.
And Huw, what's your kind of view of the future? I mean, and are there other technologies we've got to be aware of as well?
I think we're going to see the development of virtual assistants for sure. I think you'll probably touch on that on the next section, to be honest. But certainly seeing that those come into play a lot more. They'll be a lot more sophisticated. But for me, just what I would love to see are businesses embracing predictive and prescriptive analytics, because I think that's the key to a lot of things, and particularly personalisation for collections customers.
Okay, wonderful. So I don't know if we just put the questions up. Have you got any questions? So before we finish, has the emergence of more customizable, secure payment links, including A2A payments, helped with customer engagement? Have all of you mentioned about you've all mentioned about digital. Do your payment options actually allow for digital? And what are your thoughts on recent changes to APP fraud compensation plans? Will this result in changes of how fraudsters respond or consumer confidence? I don't know if any comments around the top one there around payments.
So I think making it easier for a customer to pay makes it easy for a customer to pay. Does that mean they're engaging with you and telling you what the problems are? Maybe no. So I suppose it's good for collections, bad for customer engagement. Digital will obviously allow for payment options because the customer can, there's multiple different ways, Google Pay, Apple Pay, just all sorts of, IVR payments, website payments. But yeah, the fraud piece is one that we've all got to keep watching, and that is one of the worries with digital and self-serve, is making sure you've got enough guardrails around it to make sure it's safe.
Yeah, and there's a bottom one here which is quite interesting, which is, what is trust best practice for self-serve or payment portals?
I think for me this is about UX and branding in particular. Certainly what I've learned in the last couple of months working with British Gas, for example, is that we provided them with a portal, self-service portal, but it was an out-of-the-box solution, which had a great impact to start with, but then tapered off. And now it's all about branding that and giving the customers the confidence to use it. And the branding that goes into that is second to none. It's phenomenal. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that rebranded portal in the British Gas branding will make a difference to their customers.
I mean, it does feel like that's a theme that's come across, which is like really having a joined up kind of approach to use that kind of language, and using data across the journey, and how everything linking together feels like that's really come across, I think, all of today. So with that, I'm going to say thanks to the panel. So thank you very much. If we just give them a round of applause, and thank you very much. We're going to the next one.